Back in 2002, an injury to Gary Neville meant that Danny Mills was called up to starting 11 of England's World Cup squad and started in all 5 games. So what will James be feeling about his first World Cup call-up? Let's say a very good morning and ask Danny Mills. Morning, Dan.
Morning, Danny.
Good morning, Alan. Good morning. What do you mean I only went because Gary Neville was injured?
I know. I've told you.
These scripts, Danny, these scripts.
They don't like you here, these boys, so they don't like you.
To be fair, you bang on, though.
Dan, I must admit, I thought he'd missed the boat, and I was puzzled why, but Gareth listened, or maybe he was just keeping his cards close to his chest, but he's in.
Yeah, I'm pleased that he's in. I think it could have gone either way. It could have easily left him out, and I've sort of understood, maybe that had he not been involved at all. I think at the start of the season, obviously the games at the start of the season maybe came a little bit too quickly. At the end of last season, he had a little bit of a hip injury when the squads came around, and probably wasn't available for those. And they were maybe a little bit unsure, but he's played well. And there's often one or two players that play particularly well and force their way into the squad. And with a 26-man squad, he's been able to do that. I think that the rest of the squad is fairly balanced. I don't think there's too many arguments around it. There's going to be conjecture about, the likes of Harry Maguire and things like that, but don't have too many options.
Danny was always waiting for the squad and who's going to be left out, who's going to be in. But now, I think most England fans will be saying, well, what sort of formation are we going to be playing? Are we going to play 4 at the back with an extra body in midfield, or a little bit more attacking minded? Or they're going to go with 3 at the back and maybe put Trent on that right-hand side, or Trippier? How do you think Gareth's going to look? Or will he change it game in, game out? Like the first game, he might say, look, let's go for it the first game, then be a little bit more cagey on tougher games.
Well, he talked about that yesterday, and I sort of spoke to him, sort of off air as well, and asked him those sort of questions. And obviously, because I mentioned the Women's Euros and how they played the same formation, the same start 11 right throughout, and then brought on finishers. He said, unfortunately, he said, when you've got the best players and the best team, you're able to do that. He said, if I'm honest, we don't really have that. And also we've got injuries, we've got players coming back, so we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more adaptable. Kyle Walker might not be able to play 90 minutes of the first game, So I think you've got Walker and Trippier that can. I think if you played a back 4, would probably be the fullbacks in my opinion. Yeah. Trippier played at left back, before, played there against Croatia in the opening game of the Euros. Maguire and Stones are probably the centre halves. You can then sort of change that round. We've seen Walker play as a third centre-half before. Eric Dyer could slot into that. So I think it will have to be flexible, especially in that defensive area. I think he was also very concerned about this week's end fixtures.
It's a joke, isn't it?
Well, he said, there's nothing I can do. He said, I'm pretty relaxed because I can't I can't decide what's going to happen within that. There's bound to be an injury or two. There has 26 players. There's going to be, unfortunately, it's very likely that that's going to happen. He also said we need to get to Wednesday and see what sort of condition these players are in, see how they present. This is obviously we've seen them playing. Some of the medical reports are that 1 or 2 are carrying little knocks and those types of things.
And Conte says of Harry Kane, he looks tired. He came off really fatigued.
I think they're going to have to be flexible. In that, I think he will have an ideal way of playing if everybody's fit, but we've already seen, already lost, the likes of Reece James. I think the other night during the Carabao Cup games, 2 left backs got injured, during that period as well. And before that, you lost Chilwell. So I think they are very, very prepared to be flexible, and I think that reflects the squad that they've picked, where they've got lots of players, the likes of Ben White, that are very adaptable.
Danny, what do you expect from England? What's a good look? Of course, we're hoping they get to the final and go all the way. But what's acceptable? Because me and Alan tried to map it out, and it looks like possibly they could get France in that quarter final.
Yeah, I've always said it's very, very difficult to say you have to get to this place or you have to get to that place, because it depends who you get. In previous competitions, the draw has been favourable. Let's not beat around the bush. That's what it's been. You could get to the quarterfinal against France, play unbelievably well. You could be 1-0 up or 0-0, playing great. Hugo Lloris is having an absolute worldie, and then Mbappe scores, one of the best goals you've ever seen. That could be possible. Doesn't mean you've played badly. unfortunately, you go out of the tournament. Have to get out of the group. I think we know that. And then last 16, you would look at it and go, okay, probably should get through that. And then you need a little bit of luck after that. You need a good draw. You need a good performance. You need the right refereeing decisions. So I think as long as the performances are positive, then yes, I would like to think we would get to the quarterfinals. But then it depends who you draw within that. We've seen before, sometimes big teams go out early on, and there's a team that comes up and shocks everybody. So yeah, I think it's difficult to say this is the minimum requirement. But I think if you look back, and Gareth also mentioned this before 2018, England hadn't won a knockout game for 10 years. And he went into that competition and got to the semi-final with, let's be honest, a pretty average side. When you look at the midfield that played against Croatia, and at the time, Henderson, Lingard and Ashley Young against, I think, Modric, Rakitic, and I think Brozovic, in those positions. They were better, simple as that. He come into the Euros, a little bit more experience. Okay, I think got undone by penalties, effectively. If you go on it, if those penalties go in, you win it, no one complains at all. So I think that they have been building. The players are more experienced. So I would say, yeah, you have to get out of the group.
Did they have to win the first game?
I think they will win the first game. I think they win the first two games. And then the Wales game, as we saw against Scotland, in the Euros, Wales will probably raise their game for that. It depends how Wales games have maybe gone previous to that, whether Gareth keeps a full strength team or whether he rests a few if things go to plan. So I think they get out of the group, and then you need a bit of luck. And but the way France are going, look at the injuries they're picking up at the moment. All of a sudden, if Mbappe gets injured and you get France, you're thinking, well, actually, or Griezmann gets injured, whatever. You think, oh, actually, we could beat them. So I think it's get out of the group. That is absolutely mandatory.
And who's your idea of winning? Will it be Argentina? Will it be Brazil? Or
I think I've got to go with South American, Alan, at the moment.
Yeah.
Although I know they're not in great form, but don't rule out the Germans. That they always have, there's always a knack. It's like if the Italians and the Germans are in it, they've always got a chance. But because they have fantastic way of playing tournament football.
Yeah. Dan, brilliant. We can't wait.
Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Tammy. Danny Mills there. Interesting. Ray, just quickly, do you think England have to beat Iran the first game?
Well,
because the pressure will build and
build
and build.
I think they will win the first game. I think he'll put his very strong team out and go for it, because you always want to win that first game. Puts you in a great position.
Can he tinker?
Ideal world. He might tinker against Wales, and Wales gets through.
Well, that's what I mean. If he tinkers in the first game,
I think the physios and people like that, the people behind the scenes will play a big part. Whether he rest players, and they all have their input. But certainly, if you win the first two games, you can rest a couple of players, key players, for that last 16 game.
talkSPORT Breakfast with Alan Brazil. Thursday and Friday morning, 6 till 10. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.